Good morning to all of you. And today we will begin a new topic, which is income determination and multiplier. Income determination and multiplier. Now, in the context of determination of equilibrium level of income or output and employment, there is no difference between income, employment, and output. In fact, when there is an increase in output, what does it mean? There is an increase in the level of employment. And because there is an increase in the level of employment, what happens? There is an increase in the level of income. I'm saying that again. When there is an increase in output, what does it mean? When there is an increase in output, it means there is an increase in the level of employment. And when there is an increase in the level of employment, what does it mean? It means that there is an increase in the level of income. So how do we determine the equilibrium or determination of equilibrium? So the thing is determination of equilibrium. Determination of equilibrium. The equilibrium level of income and employment, which is output, is determined where aggregate demand, which is AD, is equal to aggregate supply. Okay. So kindly write down, children. Equilibrium level of income, write down. Equilibrium level of income and employment within the brackets output is determined where aggregate demand within the brackets AD is equal to AS. When AD is equal to AS. When aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply and the level of planned savings equals planned investment, and the level of planned savings equals planned investment. So if you would see AD, what is AD? AD is C plus I. What is S? C plus S. So when we remove the common factor, I is equal to S. So we say the equilibrium level of income and employment, which is output, is determined when aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply and the level of planned savings equals planned investment. Now, how do we know? AD is equal to consumption plus investment, as already taught to you, and aggregate supply is equal to consumption plus savings. See the common factor. If you remember, remove, what do you get? I is equal to S. So that takes care of your definition. Okay. Now, there are two ways of approaching or determining the equilibrium level of income. There are two methods. The first is the aggregate demand and aggregate supply approach, AD and AS approach, and the second would be saving and investment approach. Saving and investment approach. So there are two methods for finding out the equilibrium level of income. The AD and AS approach and the saving and investment approach. Let us do the first one, the AD and AS approach. The first method, AD and AS approach. Write down. According to Keynes, the equilibrium level of income and employment is determined when aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply, where AD equals AS or C plus I is equal to C plus S. Now, let us draw a diagram. We have the x-axis, y-axis, and we have already told to you the y, which is AS. This is your 45-degree angle. Okay, on the x-axis, what will you take? Income, output, employment. And on the y-axis, what would we take? The aggregate demand, which is C plus I. Now, children, you have been taught that an investment line runs horizontally parallel to the x-axis. This is your investment line, right? Your consumption always begins from above the origin, right? Why? Because of the autonomous consumption. So if you have, this is your consumption line, C and C, it begins from above the origin. What do we have? AD is equal to C plus I, right? So here somewhere above here, you will have your AD line, AD, which is the sum of C plus I. Now what do you see over here? The point where the AD curve straight down, let's call this Y. The point where the AD curve cuts the AS curve, that will be the equilibrium point. Draw this figure, then we will write the explanation. Income, output, and employment. On the x-axis, we have taken income, output, and employment, and the y-axis we have AD, which is the summation of C plus I. I is the investment, is a dotted line parallel running to the x-axis, because investment normally is always the same at every level of income. Consumption curve is an upward rising curve, and it begins from above the origin because of autonomous consumption. What is autonomous consumption? That consumption which takes place when even income is zero. That is. So a person will consume something even if his income is zero. And we talked about that. How does he consume then? From his savings or from his borrowings. So the C curve is an upward rising curve. Okay. And above that is the AD curve, because it is the summation of these two. AD will be much higher. AD curve cuts this AS curve at this point E. This is the equilibrium point. Please draw this, then we will write down. Are we ready to write? Give me a nod if you are ready to write. Are we ready to write? Gautam, give me a thumbs up. Yeah? Ready? Mehul? Yeah, okay. So write down. AS curve represents national income. It is expressed as a 45-degree line. It is expressed as a 45-degree line from the origin. AS is the sum total of consumption and savings, C plus S. So AS is the sum total of consumption and savings. So it is represented by C plus S also. Second, the AD curve is the vertical summation of consumption within bracket C and investment demand in brackets I, schedules at each level of income. Therefore, AD curve is also represented as C plus I curve. Equilibrium is reached only when AD equals AS, because at this level there is no tendency for income and output to change. Now, according to the diagram, the economy is in equilibrium at point E, where the AD curve intersects the 45-degree line, intersects or cuts, whatever you want to write, the 45-degree line. Now, at point E, the economy is in equilibrium because the level of the desired spending on consumption and investment, that is EY. If you look into the diagram here, EY exactly equals the level of output, total output, OY. If you look here, OY. EY equals to OY. It exactly equals the level of total output of income, that is OY. Now, corresponding to E, write down, corresponding to E, OY is the equilibrium level of income or output. If there is any deviation from the equilibrium level, if there is any deviation from the equilibrium level, AD and AS will bring it back to equilibrium. So what have I told you? Once again, look on the board. On the x-axis, we take all our income, output, employment. On the y-axis, we have the AD, which is the summation of C plus I. We have the 45-degree line, which is the national income or the aggregate supply or the income. Okay. We have this line here, I, which is parallel to the x-axis. This is the investment line. This is the consumption line. Consumption line begins from above the origin because of the autonomous consumption. And AD, that is aggregate demand, is the sum of C plus I. So naturally this goes from here, somewhere up over here, above the C and I, starts from above here, and this is cutting the Y line or the aggregate supply line at this point over here, E. We call this point E, and this is the equilibrium point. So where AD equals AS, where AD equals AS, that is the equilibrium point. Understood? Now, what do we see over here? Over here we saw that at point E, the economy is in equilibrium. Why? Because the desired spending on consumption and investment, that is EY, equals OY. Understood? And OY is the equilibrium level of output. Since this is the output line, this is the equilibrium level of output. If there is any deviation, any shift, how does it come back to the equilibrium? AD and AS will bring it back to equilibrium. How? We will just learn the next. Have you copied this down, all of you? Now we will see how AD and AS adjust to each other. Can I clear the board? Yeah? Can I clear the board? Wipe out the board? Okay. What is the heading you will write? How AS and AD adjust to each other. How AS and AD adjust. How they adjust to each other. How the AS and AD adjust to each other. Okay. Write down. Equilibrium occurs when planned spending or AD equals planned output or AS. Planned spending refers to people planning to purchase final goods and services during the year. Planned output means the production units planning to produce final goods, and services. In a free economy, when AD is not equal to AS, then the output will tend to adjust up or down until the two are equal. How? Look at it now. When AS is greater than AD, first case, if AS is greater than AD, what does that mean? Planned spending is less than planned output. Planned spending is less than planned output. That is when planned spending is less than planned output. Let me draw the figure first. X, Y. And this is AD, C plus I. Okay. Draw this down, then I will explain it. Okay. Write down. When planned spending is less than planned output, AS is greater than AD. Where the flow of goods and services in the economy tends to exceed their demand. This means the consumers and firms together would be buying less goods than the firms produce. As a result, some of the goods would remain unsold. To clear the unwanted stock, the firms would plan out less production and the process of decrease in output will continue until the economy is back at the output level OY. This is all income, output, employment, now look at this on the board. This is your AS line, it is higher than the AD line, which means aggregate supply is greater than aggregate demands. In other words, there is more goods in the market and people are buying less. The demand for the goods is less, supply is more. So what happens? There is going to be some stock which is not being sold because there is no demand for them. Supply is more. See, this AS is higher than AD, this part. AS is higher than AD. That means aggregate supply is more than the aggregate demand. When supply is more, demand is less, what happens? All the goods which are not sold or not demanded, they are going to remain. Yes, they would be in stock. So now what does the producer have to do? He will have to reduce his production, keep reducing his production. I'm showing it by the arrow. Keep reducing production till he comes to the point where AD is equal to AS. Because in this area, this full area, AS is greater than AD. AS is greater than AD. Simply means supply is more, demand is less. So individuals and firms and whoever are purchasing, they will take only limited. What happens to the stock which is there, supply which is already given? That is in excess. Now how will they get rid of this excess? The production will be decreased. The producers will decrease the production. How will, till where, what level they will decrease? They will keep on decreasing the production till it comes to the equilibrium point where AD is equal to AS. Understood? So any stock which is left with the producer, what would he do? He will have to remove those stocks first, and in that case he is going to reduce his production. So he keeps on reducing his production till it comes to the point where AS is equal to AD or AD is equal to AS. So now in this you write one more line. If AS is greater than AD, write down one more line. There will be a tendency of decrease. There will be a tendency in the decrease in production and national income till it reaches equilibrium level. There will be a tendency to decrease the production and the national income till it reaches the equilibrium level of income. And we will continue the rest tomorrow as we are running out of time. Okay? So we stop till here. It may go off any minute just now. So we'll continue tomorrow. Till then, have a nice day. Stay safe.